Your worldview can change on a dime when you suddenly realise that you might be a bit different to how you've always seen yourself. And my God, I can only imagine the amplification of that when it's your kids. You suddenly realise that they might be a bit different to how you've always seen them. Well, look, it happens, so don't worry. And in this video, we're going to talk about what you can do if you think you might have ADHD or you think your kids might have ADHD. I'm going to talk about the process that's specific to the UK, and I'm going to relate that to my own personal diagnosis story. So I hope it's useful to you. Let's have a look at what we can do. So let's start off with some quick fire facts. I'll go into a bit more detail later, but if you're just passing by and you want to know the stuff quickly, here we go. The first step is your GP, always. They have to write a referral to ADHD and autism specialists. For children, you also need to contact the Senko at your kid's school, and they will start what's called a watchful waiting period, and that lasts around 10 weeks. This is to record and monitor changes in symptoms and behaviour, and then this is used as evidence to present to NHS ADHD assessors. For adults, it's slightly different. We don't have the structure of schools, so your evidence can be significant impacts on your life. Things like not being able to keep a job, not being able to sustain relationships, focus issues, emotional turbulence. Once your referral and evidence is accepted, you have an initial assessment, and this is to filter out complications and ensure that it is ADHD, and then you go through to a full assessment, which is carried out by a psychiatrist. At this point, this is where you get diagnosed and where you start your treatment planning. Now, a couple of other facts to support this process, just so you're in the know. NHS waiting times can be long. For adults, they can be up to 10 months or so. It's usually quicker with children, but you should expect to be waiting between 3 and 6 months for full assessment to be carried out. Your GP can make referral to private healthcare providers. You can also start in the private system, get assessed and start your treatment, and then move your prescriptions back to the NHS so that you're not always locked in to the private system. Where on earth do you start on this whole journey? Well, it can be anything that triggers you into looking into this, and I found that my particular trigger was a TikTok video. Good for me. However, after I'd seen that, it kind of focused my mind into asking a few questions about my life. Not specifically pertaining to ADHD, but just a kind of stock take, an audit, if you like, of where I was. And then that was the thing that pushed me to really think about this seriously. A few questions it might be worth asking are things like, are you where you should be in your life? How easy have you found it to hold down a job? Is overeating an issue? Is motivation an issue? Are relationships an issue? The answers to these questions, so long as they're uncomfortably honest for you, they may uncover a few things that you've been doing through your life that you didn't realise were ADHD, or they may uncover a few things that your kids have been doing that could be seen to be ADHD, and it's worth investigating. I asked myself these questions, and I think it's fair that I give you these answers. Am I where I thought I would be in my life? No, I'm not. I'm 35 years old. I've had about 17 million different careers, none of which have taken off and given me any sort of solid professional identity, let alone any kind of stable income. I've a son, I've owned 2 houses, and I've been married. I don't own a house anymore. My son lives away from me, so I don't get to spend as much time with him, and I'm starting divorce proceedings. I am not where I thought I was going to be when I was 35 years old. Are jobs an issue? Yeah, they are an issue. I've rarely been able to hold down a job when I'm working for somebody else. It just doesn't suit me. It just doesn't fit with me. Is overeating an issue? God, yeah, it was a massive issue. I got absolutely huge over the last year, and as I looked back through photos of myself from when I was young, I kind of realized that I was fit and slim and healthy when I was 17, and then kind of as soon as I hit 18, I started to change. My body started to change. I always had this kind of chubby cheeks, and yeah, overeating was a major issue for me. Motivation, also a major issue for me. It's cost me jobs, it's cost me assignments, it's cost me all sorts of things, but yeah, it's been a major issue. And our relationship's an issue. Well, yeah, as I said a minute ago, I'm getting divorced and my marriage broke down. And actually, it was the breakdown of my marriage that pushed me into this frame of mind where I knew that I needed to at least look internally and ask the question, was it me? So you get to that point, you answer those questions, it's all very uncomfortable. You've seen a TikTok and you think, Christ, I actually might have ADHD, or my kid might have ADHD. Well, what do you do? Who do you talk to? First of all, talk to anyone, man, like friends, parents, other ADHDers, me, leave comments. I don't mind. I'm happy to talk to you about it. but just put it out into the world with reckless abandon and make it normal. Normalize it for yourself, because by doing that and acknowledging it, first of all, that's the right thing to do. And second of all, it will make your journey just a little bit more efficient and a little bit more acceptable. Once you've talked about it to everybody, ad nauseum, I hope, then you can start to think about what the next official steps are. So we need to talk to a GP. With kids, we need to simultaneously approach the GP and their school Senko. The GP might take a two-pronged approach and send off a referral on a whim and a prayer. There might be enough evidence already. That might get the ball rolling quicker for your children. But they will also suggest that we need to do this watchful waiting period at school, which is organised by your Senko. Any information from that watchful waiting period, about 10 weeks, we're looking for changes in behaviours and traits, whether they get worse, whether they get better. Any information is then used as evidence for an ADHD assessment in children. For adults, it's a little different, as I said earlier. We don't need to necessarily evidence things in that way. If our lives aren't where we think they are and we think we may have ADHD, there's probably a good chance that the ADHD has had impacts on our progression through life. And we can talk to our doctors about that, and they understand. My doctor was very, very understanding when I called, and I was nervous, like, why wouldn't I be? I'm an adult. ADHD is something that kids get, right? No, that's a stigma. And kids with ADHD end up being adults with ADHD. They just tend to learn how to cope with it. The difference is, people who grow up with ADHD and learn how to cope with it are coping day by day, minute by minute, event by event. They're not coping in a macro sense. They're not progressing as their neurotypical counterparts. And that can be hugely distressing. So anyway, my doctor was great. I'd said what I thought was going on. I'd told her the impact it had had on my life today. And almost immediately she was like, yeah, you're probably riddled with it, mate. So she wrote a referral to my ADHD unit on the NHS. And it was taking too long for me. The waiting lists can be very long, especially for adults, because ADHD won't kill you on its own. There's evidence to suggest that it might have impact on your behaviours that could be risky and life-limiting, but actually ADHD as a thing itself won't kill you like a disease might. So you can wait with it. I didn't want to, though, because I've got ADHD and I'm super impatient, right? So after about 6 weeks, I decided I needed answers, and I'd asked my doctor friend what I could do, and he'd suggested that I go private. I approached a Priory group, and that first phone call was absolutely incredible. The guy who I spoke to wasn't a medical professional. He was support admin staff, but he made me feel like I wasn't mental. He made me feel like this was the right thing to be doing. And he mapped out the journey and the costs of what it would take to go through the private system to get a diagnosis. Your GP can be instructed to make referrals to private healthcare providers, but you need to choose that healthcare provider first, inform them that they're going to receive a referral, and then go and instruct your GP. If you do it that way and everybody's looking at it, honestly, it took me 3 weeks from that first phone call to Priory to getting diagnosed and treated. If everybody's in the know, it's really, really quick. So what does the assessment look like? You've got your referrals done and now you're going into the assessment phase. Well, it comes in two parts. That's an initial assessment and a full assessment. They say that it's broken up like this to save you some cost if you're going private, because the initial assessment is cheaper than the full assessment, and to maintain safeguards and due diligence, because the initial assessment could pick up things that are complicating your ADHD, or it could pick up that you haven't got ADHD at all and that you need treatment for something else. So once you've booked your assessments and you've been through the initial stage and the psychiatrist thinks that it is worth you going through to the full stage, at the end of that assessment, I felt incredible because I'd had the diagnosis. Now, I don't mean to trigger anybody that may not get a diagnosis of ADHD, and I wish you all the best on your journey wherever it goes. And I'm sorry that you haven't found answers at this point. However, I did find answers at that point. And if you're worried that you've got it, or you're worried that your kids have got it, I swear to you that that diagnosis moment, that moment of clarity, is absolutely like nothing on earth. It is next level, because it means that you can genuinely start the rest of your life at that point. So assessment's wonderful. Once you get to assessment, part of that is to determine what treatment you may take. There's a number of different treatments you can go for. I went for the medication route, and I've done a video about the medications and which might be the best for you. You can check that out in the pop-out banner. But my medication journey has been life-changing. I was really lucky. First dose, first med, changed my life overnight. I haven't looked back. It's been amazing. But it has been in combination with an exercise regime, and ongoing mental health work and, nutritional awareness, not necessarily therapy at this stage, but I'm very aware of my nutrition needs now, and that is helping like crazy. What happens when you get help like that is that you just feel so much more healthy and happy. You can actually progress on things that you didn't think were possible beforehand. I honestly wish this for you guys. I really wish this for anyone that's struggling and anyone that's struggling for their children. It's just amazing. Now, I know that I'm very lucky and I'm very grateful to be in a position where I can afford private healthcare. I know that not everybody can. I want to express to you the costs of this because you may think that the costs are going to be crazy. And actually, I know it's all relative, but from my position, they were fairly reasonable. In total, so far, I've spent £2,130. That has been for assessment, 3 follow-up appointments, 2 prescriptions, and 3 months worth of medication. And I'll show you how that's broken down. Okay, so my initial assessment was £350. My full assessment then went through to being £950. My psychiatrist doesn't charge to write prescriptions, so that was £0. Some do, that's worth being aware of. My medication had to be paid for privately, which was £300 for 90 tablets, and that's been over 3 months. And my follow-up appointments so far, they cost me £180 a go, and I've had enough to make up £530 worth of follow-up appointments. This has all been spread over the last 3 to 4 months, and it's also worth mentioning that every doctor and every private healthcare provider have their own nuances and their own pricing systems. This is just specifically to me, but I hope it gives you a good idea of what you can expect to pay for a private journey. So even though I started in the private sector, I am delighted to let you know that I've been moved back into the NHS. My prescriptions are now on the NHS. My doctor signs them off under the supervision of my psychiatrist. Now, due to the nature of my medication, I have to check in with my psychiatrist once every 6 months, and that will be on a private basis, so I'd have to pay my £180 for that follow-up appointment. Now, if my investment ongoing is £180 twice a year, I'm pretty okay with that. For my mental health, it's just invaluable. So think about that. Think about the ongoing costs and whether they're justifiable and affordable for you. So let's have a recap of what you can do when you think you or your kids have ADHD. The first thing to do is just take a minute and take a breath. It's okay. Answer some questions about your life or theirs and be uncomfortably honest about your answers. Talk it out. Friends, therapists, teachers, other ADHDers, even me, as I said, leave a comment. I'm happy to talk about it until the cows come home. And I want you to be too, because it needs to be normalized before we can be productive about talking to professionals. Once you got to that stage and you're ready, talk to your doctor. And once all that's gone through and it's okay for you, take your meds. And guys, have a great day.